It was a Tuesday night in November when the freezing rain washed a dying man to Madeline Brooks's feet. Most people would have called an ambulance and walked away. Madeline didn't. That single fateful act of mercy didn't just invite a monster into her home. It summoned a king. The relentless Seattle downpour hammered against the pavement, transforming the neon reflections of the city into a blurred, watery kaleidoscope. Madeline Brooks pulled her heavy wool coat tighter around her exhausted frame. She had just finished a grueling 14-hour shift at Harborview Medical Center. Dr. Harrison Miller had practically begged her to stay another 2 hours to cover the ER, but her hands were trembling from sheer fatigue. All she wanted was the quiet solace of her apartment on Pike Street, a cup of Earl Grey tea, and the blissful oblivion of sleep. She took a shortcut through a narrow, dimly lit alleyway behind a defunct dry-cleaning business, a route she usually avoided, but the rain was biting through her clothes. Halfway down the alley, her boot caught on something soft. Madeline stumbled, catching herself against the brick wall. A groan, low and wet, emanated from the shadows near a rusted dumpster. Her nurse's instinct kicked in, before fear could. She fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and illuminated a gruesome sight. A man was slumped against the brickwork, his expensive, bespoke charcoal suit ruined by an immense amount of blood. The water pooling around him was stained a deep, unsettling crimson. "Hey," Madeline said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in her veins. "Can you hear me? I'm a nurse. I'm going to call 911. She had her thumb over the emergency dial button when a hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. His grip was entirely disproportionate to the state of his ruined body. It felt like cold, wet steel. "No," he gasped. His eyes fluttered open. They were an arresting, unnatural shade of amber, luminous even in the shadows of the alley. "No police. No hospitals. Please, you are bleeding to death," Madeline stated firmly, trying to pry his fingers off her wrist. "You have deep lacerations. If I don't call an ambulance—" "If you call them, we both die," he interrupted, his voice a jagged rasp that sent a shiver down her spine. "They are coming. If they find me here, if they see you with me—" He choked, coughing up a spatter of blood that looked strangely dark, almost black in the white light of her phone. Madeline hesitated. She was a woman of science, of protocol and reason, but there was something deeply terrifying about the absolute certainty in his amber eyes. He wasn't afraid of dying from his wounds. He was afraid of what was hunting him. "My apartment is 2 blocks from here," she found herself saying, a decision she would question for the rest of her life. "Can you walk?" "With your help," he murmured, his grip loosening as he struggled to rise. His name, he managed to whisper as she practically dragged his heavy frame through the back streets, was Dorian. Dorian Hayes. Every step was an agonizing battle. When they finally reached the side entrance of her brick apartment building, Madeline was panting, her own scrubs and coat soaked in his freezing blood. Once inside her small, brightly lit bathroom, the reality of the situation crashed down on her. She eased Dorian into the dry bathtub to contain the mess and began cutting away his ruined shirt with trauma shears. What she saw made her breath hitch. The wounds on his chest and abdomen didn't look like knife cuts or gunshot wounds. They looked like he had been mauled by a wild animal. Deep, ragged gouges tore through his pale flesh. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part was that the edges of the wounds were already knitting together. What are you?" Madeline whispered, dropping the bloody shears into the sink. Dorian's head lolled back against the porcelain. "A dead man, if you don't have blood," he rasped, his amber eyes locking onto hers with a sudden, predatory intensity. The air in the bathroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madeline backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't have blood bags here," she stammered, her mind racing. "I can stitch you. I can bandage you." "Your pulse," Dorian said, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, terrifying whisper. "It is so loud, so fast." He lunged. It wasn't the movement of a dying man. It was a blur of motion. Before Madeline could scream, she was pinned against the bathroom wall, Dorian's cold face buried in the crook of her neck. She felt the sharp prick of teeth against her jugular, and then a sudden, violent shudder ripped through him. Dorian collapsed backward, clutching his chest. The unnatural healing of his wounds abruptly stopped. The skin around the gouges began to blacken, necrotizing at a rapid, horrifying pace. "What did you do?" he screamed, writhing on the bathroom tiles. "What is in your blood?" Madeline slid down the wall, gasping for air, clutching her unbitten neck. "Nothing. I didn't do anything." But she knew that wasn't entirely true. 2 years ago, she had participated in a highly classified experimental gene therapy trial led by a private pharmaceutical firm, the Vanguard Group, to cure a rare autoimmune disorder she had battled since childhood. She had signed endless NDAs. The treatment had worked, but it had altered her biology in ways her doctors still didn't fully understand. Dorian convulsed one last time, his amber eyes wide with absolute terror, not looking at Madeline, but at the digital clock on her bathroom counter. It flashed 11:55 p.m. "He found me," Dorian choked out. "The king. He's here." Before Madeline could ask what he meant, Dorian's body literally began to crumble. It wasn't decomposition, it was disintegration. Flesh and bone turned to a fine, greyish ash that settled over the white tiles of her bathroom. In less than a minute, the man she had dragged through the rain was entirely gone, leaving nothing behind but his ruined clothes, a massive blood stain in the tub, and a pile of dust. Madeline sat on the floor, trembling violently, her scientific mind shattered. She was staring at the impossible, struggling to breathe, trying to convince herself she was suffering from a severe stress-induced hallucination. Then, the clock struck midnight, and someone knocked on her front door. The knock wasn't frantic or loud. It was rhythmic, slow, and terrifyingly deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. It echoed through the small apartment, cutting through the ambient hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the rain lashing against the windows. Madeline stood up on shaky legs. Her medical training told her to assess the situation, to remain calm, but her survival instinct was screaming at her to run. She walked out of the bathroom, leaving the pile of ash behind, and crept toward the front door. She peered through the peephole. Standing in the dimly lit hallway was a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a high-end financial magazine, not in a run-down, Pike Street apartment complex. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored midnight blue overcoat over a 3-piece suit. He held a silver-handled umbrella, completely dry despite the storm raging outside. His face was structurally flawless, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and dark hair swept neatly back. But it was his eyes that made Madeline's stomach drop. Even through the distorted lens of the peephole, she could see they were pitch black, not brown, void-like, swallowing the dim light of the corridor. "Madeline Brooks," a voice spoke. It didn't come through the door. It resonated directly inside her head, smooth as velvet and cold as ice. "Please open the door. We have a mess to discuss, and I abhor rudeness." Her hand hovered over the deadbolt. She knew she shouldn't open it. She knew this was the monster Dorian had been fleeing, but a strange, heavy compulsion washed over her, dulling her panic. Her fingers turned the lock of their own accord. The door swung open. The man stepped inside without asking for permission, bringing with him the scent of ozone, rain, and something ancient and metallic, like the smell of old copper coins. He closed the door softly behind him, locking it. "Who are you?" Madeline demanded, forcing her voice to remain steady, crossing her arms over her chest to hide her trembling hands. "My name is Sebastian Graves," he said, turning to face her. Up close, his presence was suffocating. The air pressure in the room seemed to shift. "I am the CEO of Graves Enterprises, though in the circles that matter, I hold a much older, much less corporate title." He slowly stripped off his leather gloves, slipping them into his coat pocket. "I'm looking for a thief, a rather pathetic creature named Dorian. My trackers traced his blood to this exact location, yet I do not hear his heartbeat." Sebastian tilted his head, his void black eyes scanning the apartment before landing on the hallway leading to the bathroom. "I smell ash, and I smell you." Madeline stepped into his path, blocking the hallway. "There is no one here. I came home from my shift and I've been alone." Sebastian smiled. It was a terrifying expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You are lying, Madeline. But you are lying bravely. I respect that." He closed the distance between them with a speed her eyes couldn't track. Suddenly, he was inches away from her. Madeline gasped, stepping back until her spine hit the wall. Sebastian leaned in, stopping just a breath away from her neck. He inhaled deeply, closing his eyes. "He was here," Sebastian murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest. "He bled on you, and then he tried to feed on you." Sebastian's eyes snapped open, blazing with a sudden, startling intelligence. He looked at her neck, where Dorian's teeth had only just grazed the skin. "But he didn't. He couldn't. What did your blood do to him?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Madeline lied, though her mind was screaming about the Vanguard Group trials. "Dorian stole something from me," Sebastian said, his tone turning dangerously soft. "An heirloom, a ring of immense significance to my family. He was a rogue, a fledgling who believed he could outrun his king. I wounded him, expecting him to die in the gutters. But you took him in." Sebastian reached out, his cool fingers lightly tracing the jawline of Madeline's face. She flinched, but the touch wasn't painful. It was appraising. "The irony," Sebastian continued, stepping back and walking past her toward the bathroom. He looked at the ruined clothes and the pile of ash in the bathtub. He thought a mortal nurse could save him from an immortal decree. Instead, you expedited his execution. Fascinating. Madeline watched from the doorway, her mind racing. "If you know he's dead, and you know he's dust, then your ring is gone. It's not here. So you can leave." Sebastian turned slowly, reaching into the ashes with his bare hand. He sifted through the grey dust and pulled out a heavy, ornate silver ring set with a blood-red stone. He wiped the ash from it with a silk handkerchief he produced from his breast pocket. "The ring is safe," Sebastian said, slipping it onto his index finger. "My business with Dorian is concluded, but my business with you, Madeline Brooks, has just begun." "I have nothing you want," she said defensively. "On the contrary," Sebastian replied, stepping out of the bathroom and walking slowly toward her. The predatory grace in his movements was undeniable. "My kind has walked the shadows of this city since its foundation. We control the hospitals, the politicians, the real estate. I have tasted the blood of thousands, but I have never encountered a human whose veins carry a poison potent enough to turn a vampire to ash upon a mere attempted bite." He stopped right in front of her. "You are an anomaly, Madeline. A biological impossibility. And in my world, anomalies are either destroyed or they are claimed. I belong to no one, Madeline spat, anger finally piercing through her terror. A beautiful sentiment, Sebastian countered smoothly. But unfortunately for you, Dorian's actions have marked you. By bringing him into your home, by tangling your fate with his, you have alerted the other factions in Seattle. The Vanguard Group was not a simple pharmaceutical company, Madeline. Did you truly believe a miracle cure for your illness was merely human science? Madeline's blood ran cold. What? The CEO of Vanguard, Nathaniel Croft, is a rival of mine. A very old, very bitter rival, Sebastian explained, adjusting his cuffs. He has been experimenting on humans, trying to create a weapon against my bloodline. It seems he succeeded with you. You are a living, breathing weapon. Sebastian looked down at her, a strange mixture of dark amusement and genuine intrigue in his eyes. Nathaniel will know Dorian died here. He will know his experiment was a success. He will come for you to replicate the process. You cannot survive him. Madeline swallowed hard. And you? Are you going to kill me? No, Sebastian said quietly, the shadows in the room seeming to gather around him. I'm going to do something much more complicated. I am going to protect you. Pack a bag, Madeline. You are leaving this life tonight. The king requires your company. I am not going anywhere with you, Madeline stated, her voice shaking but laced with a sudden, desperate resolve. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles turning white. I am a registered nurse at Harborview. I have a life, a career, a lease. I am not abandoning everything because a man who dissolved into dust, bled in my bathtub, and a stranger in a tailored suit broke into my apartment to tell me ghost stories. Sebastian Graves did not move, but the air around him seemed to hum with a dangerous, static electricity. The shadows in the corners of her small living room stretched and contorted, reaching toward him like loyal hounds. Your lease is irrelevant, Madeline. Your career is effectively over as of 5 minutes ago. You are applying human logic to an inhuman reality. The Vanguard Group does not care about your shift schedule. They care about the weaponized antibodies currently swimming through your veins. He took a slow, deliberate step toward the window. The relentless Seattle rain continued to lash against the glass, distorting the neon glow of the Pike Street signs below. Nathaniel Croft is a creature of immense cruelty and calculation. He funded your clinical trial under the guise of philanthropy, targeting individuals with your specific autoimmune markers. You were a petri dish, Madeline. A blind experiment to engineer a biological toxin fatal to my kind. And tonight, thanks to Dorian's spectacular incompetence, Nathaniel knows the experiment yielded a viable result. Madeline's mind raced, desperately trying to find a rational explanation. She remembered the endless blood draws, the sterile white rooms of the Vanguard facility in Bellevue, the smiling faces of the researchers who assured her the gene therapy would cure her. They had saved her life. Or had they simply repurposed it? Before she could form a response, the heavy silence of the apartment was shattered by a sharp, mechanical click originating from the hallway. It was a sound Madeline did not recognize, but Sebastian did. They are here, Sebastian whispered, his void black eyes snapping toward the reinforced front door. Faster than I anticipated. Nathaniel must have had a tactical team on standby. A tactical team? Madeline gasped, panic finally overriding her disbelief. Stay behind me. Do not move. Do not scream, Sebastian commanded. The urbane, sophisticated CEO vanished, replaced by an apex predator. His jaw clenched, and a low, guttural snarl vibrated in his chest, a sound so primal and terrifying it made Madeline's knees buckle. The front door didn't just open, it exploded. A concussive blast ripped the door from its hinges, sending splintered wood and metal shrapnel tearing through the apartment. Madeline screamed, covering her head as she dropped to the floor behind the kitchen island. Through the settling smoke and drywall dust, 3 figures stepped into her home. They were clad in matte black tactical gear, their faces obscured by advanced night vision goggles and heavily filtered gas masks. They carried suppressed submachine guns, the laser sights cutting through the dust like glowing red strings. "Target acquired," one of the mercenaries barked into a comms unit. "Engaging the host. Secure the biological asset." They weren't human. Madeline knew it the moment they moved. Their speed was unnatural, their footsteps completely silent, despite the heavy gear. These were Nathaniel Croft's elite, vampire mercenaries equipped with modern weaponry. They raised their weapons toward Sebastian. They didn't stand a chance. Sebastian moved with a velocity that defied physics. He did not dodge the bullets. He simply wasn't there when the triggers were pulled. The suppressed gunfire thudded harmlessly into the drywall where he had been standing a microsecond before. He reappeared behind the lead mercenary. With a sickening crunch, Sebastian's hand slammed into the back of the mercenary's helmet, crushing the reinforced Kevlar and the skull beneath it as if it were a fragile eggshell. The mercenary collapsed, rapidly decaying into ash before his body even hit the floor, leaving behind an empty suit of tactical gear. The remaining 2 mercenaries pivoted, firing blindly. One bullet grazed Sebastian's shoulder, tearing through his expensive overcoat and the flesh beneath. Madeline gasped as a spray of dark, crimson blood hit the wall. But Sebastian merely smiled, a terrifying, predatory baring of fangs that glinted in the dim light. He lunged at the second mercenary, seizing the man by the throat and hurling him with impossible force across the room. The mercenary crashed through the heavy plate glass window, plummeting down into the rainy abyss of the Seattle night. The final mercenary, realizing the absolute futility of the attack, dropped his weapon and drew a long, jagged combat knife. It wasn't steel. It gleamed with a pulsing iridescent light. "Bone glass," Sebastian noted, his voice laced with cold amusement. "Nathaniel sent you with the executioner's blade. How flattering." The mercenary thrust the blade toward Sebastian's chest. Sebastian caught the man's wrist, his grip like a vice. He twisted, breaking the arm with a loud snap. As the mercenary howled, Sebastian stepped inside his guard, plunging his hand directly into the mercenary's chest. He ripped a beating, blackened heart from the man's rib cage. The mercenary immediately disintegrated into a cloud of grey dust. Sebastian tossed the crumbling heart aside, wiping his bloody hands on a handkerchief. The gunshot wound on his shoulder was already closing, the torn fabric of his suit the only evidence he had been hit at all. He turned to Madeline, who was trembling violently on the kitchen floor, surrounded by ash, shattered glass, and bullet holes. "I told you," Sebastian said softly, stepping over the debris and offering her his hand. "Your life here is over. We leave now, or the next team they send will simply burn the building to the ground with you inside it." Madeline stared at his outstretched hand. It was covered in the dust of his enemies. She had spent her life saving people, and now she was stepping into a world of endless, bloody slaughter. But as she looked at the shattered remains of her apartment and heard the wail of distant sirens, she realized she had no choice. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, cold, and strangely reassuring. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To the one place in Seattle where Nathaniel Croft cannot reach you," Sebastian replied, pulling her to her feet. "My sanctuary." They did not take a car. Sebastian led her through a hidden subterranean network beneath the city. a forgotten labyrinth of Prohibition-era smuggling tunnels and abandoned subway lines that the vampire elite had claimed over a century ago. Madeline walked in a stunned, silent daze, the reality of her shattered life weighing heavily on her shoulders. An hour later, they emerged into the private parking garage of the towering Ethelgard building in downtown Seattle. A private elevator whisked them up 70 floors, depositing them directly into Sebastian's penthouse. The space was breathtaking, a sprawling monument to centuries of accumulated wealth and refined taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, storm-swept view of the Seattle skyline. The walls were lined with ancient texts, priceless Renaissance art, and weapons from long-forgotten wars. A massive fire crackled in a dark marble hearth, casting dancing shadows across the velvet furniture. "Sit," Sebastian commanded gently, gesturing toward a plush leather sofa near the fire. He walked to a crystal decanter, pouring a measure of amber liquid into a glass, and handed it to her. "Drink. It is merely bourbon. It will calm your nerves." Madeline took the glass, her hands still shaking. The bourbon burned her throat, but the warmth spreading through her chest was a welcome anchor to reality. Sebastian removed his ruined overcoat, tossing it onto a nearby chair. He sat opposite her, his dark eyes studying her intently. The silence stretched between them, thick with unsaid questions and lingering adrenaline. "You called me a weapon," Madeline finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "You said Nathaniel Croft designed me to kill your kind. If that's true, why did you bring me here? Why didn't you just kill me and eliminate the threat?" Sebastian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because, Madeline, Nathaniel is a scientist, but he is a fool. He created a poison, yes, but he did not realize the full potential of what he engineered. He sought to create a toxin. He accidentally created a grail." "A grail?" "My kind," Sebastian began, his voice taking on a hypnotic, rhythmic cadence, "is bound by absolute laws. We require blood. We cannot walk in the sunlight. We are immortal, yet we are imprisoned by the dark. For centuries our alchemists have searched for a way to break the solar curse, to walk in the day." He stood up, pacing slowly in front of the fire. "Your blood is toxic to a fledgling like Dorian. It is lethal to an ordinary vampire, like the mercenaries who attacked us. But to a royal, to a king whose bloodline traces back to the first nights of our existence, your blood is not a poison. It is an evolutionary key." Madeline's breath hitched. "You want to feed on me?" "If I wanted to feed on you, I would have done it in your apartment," Sebastian stated bluntly, stopping to look at her. "No. If I merely drink from you, I will suffer immense pain, and then I will heal. The effect would be temporary. What we need to survive this war with Vanguard, is a bond." He knelt in front of her, bringing his face level with hers. The sheer magnetism of his presence was overwhelming. She could smell the rain on his skin, the dark, intoxicating scent of power. "A blood bond," Sebastian explained softly, his void black eyes holding hers captive. "It is an ancient ritual. It requires a mutual exchange. I drink from you, and you drink from me. It binds our life forces together. It will rewrite your biology, halting your human aging, increasing your resilience, and protecting you from Nathaniel's trackers. And for me, it will grant me the sun. It will." Madeline stared at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "You are asking me to become a vampire?" "I am asking you to become my equal," Sebastian corrected, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. "You will not be a vampire. You will be bound to me, sharing my strength, sharing my long life. But you must choose this, Madeline. A bond forced is a bond broken. Nathaniel will tear this city apart to find you. He will send legions to reclaim his stolen experiment. With the sun on my side, I can slaughter them all. I can keep you safe." He reached out, his cool fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a cascade of shivers down her spine. There was a desperate, undeniable hunger in his eyes. Not just for her blood, but for her. For the salvation she represented. "If I say no," she whispered, her gaze dropping to his lips before snapping back to his eyes. "Then I will assign my strongest guards to smuggle you out of the country. I will give you a new identity, immense wealth, and I will pray that Nathaniel never finds you," Sebastian said, his tone heavy with absolute sincerity. "But I will not force you." Madeline looked at the fire, then at the sprawling, dark city beyond the glass. Her old life was gone. Burned to ash in a Pike Street bathtub. She was entirely alone in a world of monsters, hunted by the very people she thought had cured her. But looking back at Sebastian, at the vampire king who had ripped out a heart to save her, who knelt before her, offering his power rather than taking it, she felt a strange, terrifying spark of defiance. She wasn't going to run. She was going to fight. Madeline set the glass of bourbon on the coffee table. She reached out, her warm, trembling hands cupping Sebastian's cold, flawless face. "Do it," she breathed, tilting her head back, exposing the delicate, pulsing vein of her throat. Sebastian's eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide to consume the iris. A low groan rumbled in his chest, a sound of absolute reverence and predatory desire. "Forever, Madeline," he whispered against her skin, his breath sending electric shocks through her nervous system. He pulled her into his arms, his mouth descending upon her neck. The sharp sting of his fangs breaking her skin was immediately followed by a rush of euphoric, blinding heat. The world outside the penthouse faded into nothingness. The war for the night had begun. Did Madeline make the right choice, or did she just trade one monster for a much darker destiny? The war between the Vampire King and the Vanguard Group is only just beginning. If you want to know what happens when Sebastian finally walks in the sunlight, hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel.